Hello everybody, we have a new game with the black pieces. We are rated 879 against Back to the Future 935. He opens up with 1e4 and we play d6. He brings out the bishop and eyes the light squares towards our king. Standard developing move. I'm just going to develop a minor piece towards the center, and it immediately hits the pawn, so he has to defend it somehow. This is the second time we've seen someone defend it with the queen like this. It didn't end well for them the last time, but they bring the queen out, which defends the pawn, but it also doesn't develop a piece or get closer to castling. Also, it makes the queen more vulnerable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to develop my knight. Normally I would just feign Keto and castle, but because he's doing this weird thing, I'm going to develop this knight because it has really nice squares to immediately jump to just because of the way he places pieces. And for example, this square hits the queen and this fork, whereas this square hits the queen and the bishop. So now I get my choice as to which one I want. If I jump for this one, he can defend. I guess in two ways. If I go here, I get the bishop pair, which is always nice. So I think I'm going to go for that. I think I'm just going to jump in with my knight. Now, instead of developing, I'm moving a piece twice, yes. But it's with a good reason. One, because he doesn't get to develop in response, so it's not like he's gaining a lead in development. He has to move his queen in response. So that's not a gain of time for him. And I get to hit the bishop, so it comes with a threat. And this guy, ooh, that's not the move. He hangs his bishop, he doesn't see the double attack. So we just take the free bishop and now the game is over in 5 moves. These lead chess ratings are crazy. So anyway, he pushes the pawn. What does this threaten? It threatens the knight, pawn, and the knight. Sneak attack. I love sneak attacks, so credit to this guy. What's the downside of this? Well, it also just hangs the pawn, so now everything's defended. And again, the game's completely over. So now he strikes in the center with d4, putting a pawn in the center, opening up his bishop, and attacking the knight. There's no real drawbacks to this move. I don't want to lose my knight, right? So I am going to move it here, just so that it's on the safe square, and it comes with tempo, so I'm not losing any time. Because now he has to move his queen, and then I'll get to develop another minor piece. So he develops his queen to another weird square because you can kick it further, so it's a bit odd. Just out of curiosity, I'm gonna kick it. This move, the inclusion of this move can't be bad for me because it controls this square from the bishop. Okay, so he moves his queen here and throws in a check. Fine. I'm actually gonna, if you block with the bishop, this pawn hangs. I'm gonna block with the queen, offer a queen trade, because I'm up a full bishop, so this trade would be good for me. And I'd like to argue that this h6 inclusion favors me because when I castle, my king has some space. It controls the g5 square, so I feel like it's a useful move. He doesn't take my queen and just leaves it hanging. Luckily, it's protected by the knight. I could try to just c6 him, but because I'm up a piece, I could also take. He'll take back with the knight, threatening the c7 fork, which I can defend in a number of ways. But I'm up a piece, and c6 is kind of principled, so I'm going to throw it in. This kicks the queen and helps control the center. So it's nice that it controls the d5 square for the pawn and the knight. So it's a useful move, and it comes with tempo. And now he's just waste time trying to move his queen again. Okay, he just moves it back. No real threat. No real drawback unless this attack gets close to trapping it. So now let's see if we can do something else. Now that this diagonal's blocked, I was thinking maybe we can move our queen here and attack this, because that looks really annoying for him to defend. You know, like this is obviously, I don't mind seeing that, and I don't mind seeing g3, because none of those moves are good developing moves. It also creates some space for the bishop, the knight if I need to retreat. Create some more coordination squares. Some more coordination squares. It also x-rays the queen, which is nice because now I could play something like e5. So he moves his pawn, which doesn't threaten anything. It just stops my threat, weakens the light squares around his king. So I kind of want to play e5. If he takes, I got the sneak attack trade. So let's go with that. I guess in response, I have to consider if he kicks my queen. It's a tempo move. But that's not a big deal because I could just retreat my queen and this thing is never a problem for me. So we'll go e5. We'll create some space for this bishop because now that the knight's on g6, we're not going to fianchetto it like you normally see when I try to play the d6 on move 1. And so he does throw in this queen attack, and now I don't have any way to stay on the 4th rank to sneak attack his queen, but that's fine, it's not a big deal. I'll just retreat it to which square? Let's see, how is this square? The square looks pretty well defended. It doesn't look like he can attack me easily. So let's go here. It x-rays the king. And he throws this in, which is kind of clever considering this is pinned. The only problem with this is that it's still attacked twice. For example, if the knight wasn't here, this is kind of good because I can't take and so I have to move my queen again. But now what if I take with the knight? Right, if he takes back, I'll take with the queen. So that's just a free pawn. And now he just has no center. He just lost it all. I'm up a light squared bishop and 2 central pawns. So that's overwhelming, obviously. He just long castles, which makes some sense. He's trying to get to some safety. The rook is kind of active, put some pressure down the d-file. There's no real drawback. He's just down a piece, so now I can trade some more and ruin his pawn structure. Or I could take the bishop and have 2 bishops against 2 knights, which is also scary. I don't know which one I want more. I guess I'll just take the bishop because it's such a strong piece with all these available squares. And it ruins his pawn structure here as well, so it's a different type of ruin. Okay, so now I want to get my king to safety, just bring my pieces out. I'm just going to develop my bishop and castle. Maybe I'll castle queenside, depending. He jumps his knight in, again, because this pawn is pinned, so he's doing all the things he can think of to try to be very clever and cute. So now if I castle, he wants this fork. I don't really think it's the biggest deal, but I also have a funny move. I had just moved my bishop here, but now I could actually move it here, which defends his threat and removes the bishop from the attack. And this is funny because it leaves his knight on pre. So it just hangs there, it just sits there now. Not really, like it looks nice, but it doesn't actually do anything now. And of course I'm going to either put my bishop here or castle, and it will be hanging for real. It's just a really funny move, bishop e8. I like this move. I probably could have just castled, let him take the exchange and I'll still be fine, but bishop e8 seems a lot smarter, almost. So now he develops his knight, getting all of his pieces out finally. And it's towards the center, but it doesn't really have any forward jumps. So now it's my turn. I'm just going to castle because this creates the subtle threat of pawn takes knight. Now that I'm not pinned. And maybe he'll miss it. And castling is obviously a good move anyway. So it's not like I'm playing for tricks. It just happens to contain a trick. Sneak attack. And he's thinking. And once that knight moves or is taken, we can bring our bishop back out. We can develop. We want this bishop really on e6, not the queen, or maybe on f5. We could launch these pawns up now if we want. Since we're opposite side castled, we're up so much material. Okay, so he leaves the pawn hanging, and the knight hanging, and he moves the queen. What does this threaten? Nothing. The drawback is it hangs the knight, of course. So we take the knight. No questions asked. Thank you for free stuff. Free. And now he has to move the queen, but this pawn is hanging, so he could take with either piece. Okay, he takes with the rook. He doesn't want any trades, I suppose. But now I'm going to do another sneak attack, and I'm noticing that he has 4 pieces lined up on this diagonal and no pawns. And I'm going to go b6 because they're asking to be skewered. Like a chicken kebab, like a souvlaki. These guys are, and even if you move 1 to try to get out of it, there's still 3 more. So I'm not sure you can get out of it. Maybe you can move the rook to stop the bishop from going there. So he moves the knight, which doesn't stop me from doing this. It does threaten to take this knight, but that knight's covered by 2 pieces. Also, it could be threatening to go here, but at the same time, again, he would have to respond to my skewer, because my skewer is a more powerful threat. However, I could take the knight first, forcing him to recapture. And even if he recaptures with the queen, this is still a skewer, because now it skewers both rooks. So I don't think he can get away with it. So I'm going to take the knight first to reduce the amount of units he has on the board, which will make the game simpler. He doesn't move his queen, so here I come with the boom. Maybe he could sack his rook. I'll take the rook. He takes the bishop. But, I mean, he's down 7 points of material, so obviously nothing's good for him. Resignation is the best. And I forgot my timer again. Timer, stopwatch, go. So he moves his rook and eyes my king. I am going to take his rook and hit the queen. He could try a rook sacrifice and then I can take, but he has no queen checks because this covers that. The bishop covers that square, the queen covers that square, the pawn covers this square. And even if he did, I would be able to block with my queen, so there's no perpetual. So he moves his queen back, it eyes the bishop, but you know, he's moving backwards. That can't be correct for him. I'm just going to push the pawn. He'll probably move to a dark square, which which encourages me to develop like this with tempo. But he moves his queen back. He's just putting some pressure here now. No big deal. There's free pawns here. I mean, you can win in a number of ways. First, I'm just going to get my king off of this row. That removes any potential tactics. For example, like let's say your bishop was here and you go queen here for the queen trade, he can take your queen because your pawn was pinned to the king. There's no need to run into anything like that, so you move the king out of the way if you want to be fully safe. He opens up his king to protect this pawn, but now his king is even weaker on the dark squares. I'm immediately gonna hop on that train and take a look into his dark squares with my queen, and I'll back it up with my bishop, threatening some nastiness. He now comes here and threatens my pawn, but like I said, I wanted to bring this here anyway. Now it's defended. He can't add any more attackers, and I have this. So let's throw in this check and push his king out into the center towards our bishops. Okay, and I'm just curious how he's going to respond to this, because he can't go to any of these squares. So if he wants to protect the pawn, he has to go king d1. But after queen here, the king is then forced here, and I get to gobble the pawn anyway. So this is just short calculation. I go here, but because of this wedge pawn, he doesn't actually get to escape, and he has to go back to the back rank. Now if I go up, he'll get to go here and escape this way. We could trade queens. We're up 13 points of material. What else do we have? This check here. We actually have this check. Yeah, that's good. And I only have 50 seconds left. So after here... Oh no, that's not good. What am I saying? Because the rook takes. I don't know why I thought the queen could take after that. Alright, so let's just take off the queens, since I have no time. I wanted to find some cool mating net. Go f5, bring in the rook, f5, f4. But we'll just go this way. Well, I'm not going to trade the queens actually. I'm just going to take stuff with check, because I'll always be able to trade the queens when I want. And if I can open the diagonals for these bishops, it'll be easy. Actually, in a mating sequence like this pawn's in the way. This e-pawn is in the way, so I want to move it. So now I relocate my bishop to give natural checks, and now these bishops are ready for mating diagonals. I just need to get my queen and this pawn out of the way. But I still have to be careful about this checkmate, right? I'm going to go here, which puts double protection on this pawn and protects the bishop for... Now when I push, this queen is trapped. So I have all my pieces in the center, like they tell you to do. I didn't get my rooks in the game, but I mean, this is so powerful, I didn't even need them. I'm up 14 points of material, so even if these rooks were off, I'd still be up 4 points of material. That's why I didn't need them. So he just pushes the pawn because he's in some type of zugzwang. I mean, he can move, but there's no point. And now his queen is pinned and hanging. So now this should be over pretty soon. He put up a good fight. I got low on time. But these bishops are just too strong. And you can see how much stronger these two pieces are than his rook. Now that his rook is pinned, I get to push my pawn without a care in the world. And he can't stop it, because if he gets out of the pin with his king, I still get the queen. Checkmate. Boom. Right? So, that was really nice. Now we have a game with the white pieces. We're 892 against 858, Mr. Freddy 12A. We're going to start with c4. This move controls the central square. If you start with d4, also fine. Then they could play d5. But now if they play d5, you get to trade a side pawn for a central pawn. And Freddy does not want to play with me. He's got 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. Freddy's gone. So we got a new game with the black pieces against a 945 Edelweiss 88. So now we get black again. We have d6 on move 1. He puts a pawn in the center, protects it with a minor piece next. Makes perfect sense. I'm going to put a minor piece in the center and attack his pawn. And getting one step closer to castling. Makes perfect sense. So now what would make sense from him is developing a minor piece or putting a pawn in the center. Did he do that? No. What did he do? He put his queen in front of his bishop. I'm assuming he's really fixated on pushing this pawn. But even if you were, you could have done that with the knight, right? Or the pawn. You didn't need to try to... I mean, maybe he has something else in mind, but this move is just garbage, right? So we're just going to... You know, every time they put their queen here, I want to ditch my initial plans and put a knight here, because they keep walking into this square, which is good for me. They won't even let me play my system. So I'm just going to put the knight here and develop a second minor piece. He protects his center and opens up his bishop. This lets me go here. He'll have to stay connected to this pawn. I could do that. It's not, but I'm going to wait for a better moment to do it. And I'm just going to start with g6 and develop the bishop the way we planned on. And I'll wait to see if there's a more opportune moment, if we can get something more out of this, depending on where his pieces are later. I mean, it does make his queen go back, which is nice. I could follow it up with c5 or e5, which is nice. Okay, but he develops his bishop and prepares long castling. But his bishop now also walks into e5 with tempo. That's an idea. Let's see, if he pushes, let's say I don't do anything and he pushes, so, you know what? I'm gonna throw this knight move in. It's not a waste of time because it comes with tempo. His queen can't attack my knight because it has to defend the c2 pawn. If he goes back to its starting square, he can't long castle, so he basically has to go queen d2, which is where they normally put the queen in these lines to create this battery. They never put a queen e2, so it's a waste of time for him. Now again, I can throw in e5. I don't have to. Kind of want to though, just to hit the bishop and see where it goes. He could go here and offer the trade of bishops, but I'll just ignore him again. Oh no, I'm not going to ignore him, because normally I would ignore him so he spends all of his turns taking me. But in this scenario, I would have taken the bishop, which lures the queen here, and then this fork would have worked, so that would have won material for me. So he moves the bishop to this pin, which then was the drawback of my move, because it opens up the dark square diagonal. But again, we had intended to develop our bishop anyway to one of these squares, so we can just do that now and overprotect this knight. We can prepare castling. Maybe we could even castle queenside depending on what happens. Okay, so he castles queenside. He hasn't touched the king side. That's fine. But now it's our move. I'm thinking we should just develop our minor piece over here, which eyes his king side. I'm thinking we can castle. We can play something like c5, supporting this knight, queen a5, b5, b4. Oops. And start an attack on his king. What else? Yeah, that's my plan. I mean, I could castle queenside as well. It's an option. Maybe he'll jump his knight in here. Okay, he doesn't. He just develops another piece and attacks my center. It might have been smarter to play f4, trying to pawn storm me and break down the center this way. But he puts the piece here. I'm not really threatened because if he takes me, I'll take back, which moves his king's defender away. Also, I had planned on playing c5 anyway, like I had mentioned. That does give him the d5 square that he can jump into. At which point I can take and he'll fill the hole. I'm just going to go with c5 because it also opens up a diagonal for my queen towards his king, which is always nice. the downside of putting your pawns like this, well, the upside is they protect this square very nicely. The downside is they don't protect this square at all, the d5 square. So you have to always be careful. He takes my knight. We're obviously going to take back, but with which pawn? Well, we want to leave this pawn as defenses for the king side, and we want to get rid of this pawn to open up lines for the queen side. So I guess we'll take with this pawn and see where his knight jumps into. It might jump into the center because this knight's pinned, so it adds pressure. In that case, I'll probably just chop it, and now he'll have this awkward pawn here. So we'll just go with that. Okay, so now he has this weak pawn here. We could bring a rook to the c file and stare at his king. I would love to play queen a5, but his queen is currently there. So there's also castling, right? So there's a bunch of reasonable moves we could make. I'm just gonna which move do I want to make? There's also the pawn storm coming. And then maybe you want to put this rook. You know what, let me castle, because in either case I think I want this rook here and maybe this rook on B or A. And so now I'm continuing my development. It's move 12. Materials equal, which is crazy. That's probably the best our opponents have done thus far. But by move 12, get a playable position like this. But now it's opposite side castling, so it's important to go after your opponent's king. His king looks weaker than mine because I have an open c-file. I have this enemy pawn in his space towards his king. His king is closer to the center than mine. He needs to move it at some point. And my bishop is purely defensive, but that's fine because I don't want to get checkmated. And I need to use my heavy pieces on the queen side on these 3 files in conjunction with these 2 pawns, the b7 and a7. I'm now realizing that castling was probably slightly less accurate than moving the queen to, let's say, c7 or b6, because at least moving my queen would have freed up my knight, which would have come with the threat of knight takes d5. Okay, so anyway, he now plays f4, attacking, trying to break down our little structure in the center. That's a fair move. I'm now going to move my queen to initiate this threat. I don't want to block my pawns though, because I do want to roll them up the board. So I'm going to play this weird looking queen c7. After a rook goes behind it, the queen will be tied down because of checkmate threats. It also creates this threat immediately. So it's a pretty, it looks like a useful move, and now it doesn't block my b pawn, which I need to launch if he creates any hooks. It's not the fastest attack unless I can involve this knight, unless he lets me do that. But his attack's even slower, maybe. So at least I have the open C file, so that's nice for me. Having said that, all of the people we played before him were just hanging queens and pieces left and right. This guy's playing very reasonable. I mean, f4? The other guys wouldn't have found that. They would have hung their queen like this. So Mr. Edelweiss. Whoa. What in the holy moly? So he tries to shut down this attack that I'm going to brew up and protect this pawn at the same time by going c4, locking things up and protecting. However, there is en passant, which would get rid of this pawn, leave this pawn hanging, and hit his queen. So I'm going to en passant him because I want this file to be open, not closed. So it'd be a huge mistake to let him just do what he did and not take. If he gets to close down the position and protect this pawn, that would be really bad for you. So I want to open the position, keep this pawn weak, and now his king's pretty weak. I could take this pawn. It immediately comes with another threat, so I'm going to do that. You could also maybe have started with a rook behind, coming with the threat, but maybe he could have pushed in that case, protecting the pawn. So I think this is smarter. And now that you took this pawn, he still can't go here immediately and put pressure on you, so he's not really fast enough. Also, you're gonna do this. You also now are threatening not only this pawn, but you're threatening, let's say, f6, bishop goes back, knight takes here, winning this pawn. I don't know if you want to go messing around on the king side right now. You probably should just play over here. Okay, so to remove the threat, he pushes the pawn. But the pawn is technically pinned, so it's not threatening my knight. This pawn is hanging, and before I was talking about taking here, but I'm thinking about taking this way because that opens up this diagonal, which looks deadly for my opponent. You could also do something like b5 or put a rook behind. There's options. I want to open up my bishop though, because that increases the power of my forces significantly. And that goes from a defensive bishop to a monster that coordinates. So he takes the pawn. I couldn't care less about the pawn. That was not my purpose for doing that. I can jump in here on the coordinating square, hitting the rook, hitting this pawn, or I could bring in another piece. I do like bringing in another piece. If you trade and he takes, I don't really see. Well, then you open up this square for your queen to come in. That's kind of nice. And he has no dark square bishop to protect all his weaknesses. So let's do that just to deflect, remove a defender of the dark squares, right, which we have eyeing his king, and really to remove his queen from this diagonal. So now that we can control it. Why do we want to control it? Well, before I was thinking of utilizing the rooks on the open file, but now that we have the open diagonals like this, we don't need the rooks, and because he doesn't have a dark square bishop, so these guys are basically out of the game. It's as if they don't exist. And if his queen doesn't come back in time, he's just going to get checkmated basically by the dark square bishop and the queen. I could always still add my rooks in the attack, and I'm up a pawn. Maybe he'll be enticed and take this, but that's going to be checkmate in 2. Also, this pawn's hanging, just an observation. So this is obviously the threat, check and mate. This is the first time I've had more time than my opponent in any of the games, but this is also the first time that my opponent's been playing well. I'm very impressed up until this move. I'm very impressed with the way my opponent's been playing and their understanding of like how chess should be played. Opposite side castling, throwing the F pawn, you know, really good stuff. But it's crazy how they do all that great strategical stuff and then miss like the obvious checkmate. So that was a good game by Edelweiss. Pretty competitive actually. Couple bad decisions, but overall nicely done. Feel free to submit your rapid games in my Discord. I hope this helped you. Goodbye.